Okay, so picture this pitch meeting. I walk into a Hollywood studio and I lay out this script. You've got this incredibly dysfunctional, wealthy family.
Right.
There's a kidnapping plot. There's human trafficking. You've got international political intrigue, false sexual assault allegations involving a high-profile politician's wife.
And don't forget the global famine that threatens to wipe out civilization.
Exactly, the famine. And through all of this, the protagonist rises from a literal prison dungeon to become the second most powerful man in the known world.
It sounds like a blockbuster.
It does. But if I pitch that today, the studio exec probably tells me it's too much, it's too unbelievable. But we aren't talking about the latest Netflix thriller or a new season of Succession here. We are talking about one of the oldest, most famous narratives in human history.
Yeah, it really is a remarkable story. And I think what makes it endure isn't just the high-stakes drama. I mean, though, as you said, there is plenty of that.
Yeah.
It's the layers of meaning underneath the surface. It's a story that functions on about 3 different levels simultaneously.
And that is exactly what we're doing today on The Deep Dive. We are tackling the story of Joseph, specifically looking at Genesis chapters 37 through 50.
Right.
But we are going to try to move past the standard Sunday school version of this. The guy with the colorful coat who had some cool dreams.
Oh.
We've got a massive stack of research here for you.
We really do.
Everything from archaeological papers on ancient slave prices to some pretty deep theological treatises on how fate actually works. So what is our mission here?
Well, we're going to peel back those layers we just mentioned. First, we need to look at the history, because there are some really gritty details in the sources about trade routes and economics that suggest this isn't just a fable. Then we have to talk about this concept of providence, exploring whether God is just reacting to bad luck or if there is a plan. And finally, a fascinating concept called typology, which connects Joseph thematically to Jesus.
And I have to say, the typology stuff where Joseph's life weirdly mirrors a much later figure is honestly what blew my mind when I was prepping for this.
It is why.
But we have to earn that. We have to start where the trouble starts, the family.
Ah, yes. The ultimate toxic workplace, which just happened to be a tent in Canaan.
Right. So we have Jacob, the father. He has 12 sons. And if you're familiar with the text, you know he's not exactly winning any Father of the Year awards. He doesn't treat them equally, does he?
Not even close. And that's really the spark for everything that follows. Jacob's favoritism wasn't subtle at all. It was public, it was tangible, and frankly, it was humiliating for the other brothers.
Yeah.
The text says he loved Joseph more because he was the son of his old age, and he gave him a specific gift that became the absolute catalyst for a total family fracture.
The famous coat of many colors. I feel like everyone knows this, right? It's the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. The Technicolor dream coat.
Well, hold on a second. This is where we have to do our first bit of myth-busting based on the linguistics.
Oh, no. Don't tell me there's no coat.
There was a coat, but the many colors part is actually up for debate. Yeah, the Hebrew phrase there is kitanet pasim. Traditionally, we say many colors, but a lot of scholars and the linguists in our source material suggest it actually translates to a long-sleeved or full-length tunic.
Okay, but that sounds way less impressive. Joseph in the amazing long-sleeve tunic just doesn't have the same ring to it.
True.
Why does the sleeve length matter so much?
Think about the function of clothing in the ancient world. If you're wearing a short tunic or a sleeveless one, what are you dressed for?
Work, I assume. Manual labor. You're out there moving rocks, herding sheep.
Exactly. You need freedom of movement. But if you are wearing a floor-length, long-sleeve tunic, you can't really do heavy lifting. You'd trip over it. The sleeves would get in the way of everything.
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this. It wasn't just a pretty gift. It was a uniform.
It was a management uniform. Jacob was basically signaling to the 10 older brothers, who, by the way, were grown men working out in the heat. He was saying, you guys are the laborers. Joseph, my teenager, is the supervisor.
Man, okay, that changes the dynamic completely. It's not just Daddy likes his coat better. It's Daddy made him my boss.
Precisely. It was a massive status symbol. It exempted Joseph from manual labor. And naturally, the sources describe this as causing deep relational fracture.
I bet.
The brothers couldn't even speak peaceably to him. Sibling envy just intensified into pure hatred. And Joseph, to be fair, didn't really have the emotional intelligence to de-escalate the situation.
Right, because he decides this is the perfect time to share his dreams.
Yes. He has these dreams where his brothers' sheaves of wheat are bowing down to his sheaf, and later the sun, moon, and stars are bowing to him. And he just goes and tells them about it.
Read the room, Joseph. You're already wearing the supervisor coat. Maybe keep the everyone bows to me dream in your journal.
It really is a classic case of what modern psychologists might compare to golden child syndrome.
Yeah, we see that today.
When a parent elevates one child so clearly, whether it's based on academic success or sports today or a coat back then, it breeds comparison. And comparison is the thief of joy. In this case, it was the breeder of hatred. It creates intense step-family tensions.
And that hatred turned dangerous fast. The brothers are out tending the flocks at Dothan. Joseph shows up, probably wearing that special tunic, and they literally plot to kill him.
They do.
They throw him in a pit. But then they see a caravan coming and decide to make a profit instead. They sell him into slavery.
And this brings us to the historical layer we wanted to cover.
Yeah.
Because there is a detail in the text here, specifically the price tag, that seems minor, but is actually a huge anchor for the historical accuracy of this story.
Yes, Genesis 37:28. It says they sold Joseph for 20 shekels of silver.
Right. Now, if you're just reading the story for the plot, you skim right past that number. But Kenneth Kitchen, a very prominent Egyptologist, did this fascinating research where he tracked the price of slaves across ancient history.
Like an inflation calculator for human trafficking.
Essentially, yes. And here is what he found. In the 18th and 19th centuries BC, which is exactly the window of time when Joseph would have lived based on biblical chronology, do you know what the average price of a slave was in the Near East?
Well, I'm going to guess 20 shekels.
Exactly 20 shekels.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Couldn't a writer living, say, 1,000 years later just guess that number? Or maybe the price just stayed the same for a really long time.
That's the thing. It didn't stay the same. Inflation was real even back then. If you look at documents from later periods, the price skyrockets.
Really?
Yeah, by the time of Moses, the legal price is 30 shekels. In the Assyrian period, it's 50 or 60. By the Persian period, it's over 90 or even 100.
So if someone was inventing the story much later in the Persian period, which is what some skeptics claim, they would have likely written down 90 shekels because that was a going rate they knew.
Exactly. They would project their current economic reality backward onto the story. The fact that the text gets the 20 shekels price tag perfectly correct for that specific narrow window of history is a massive argument that we're dealing with a reliable historical memory.
That is incredible.
It's like carbon dating the text using economic data.
That is genuinely fascinating. It anchors the story in reality for you as a reader. Now, speaking of reality, there's another detail about the trade route that causes some confusion. The text mentions they were Ishmaelites and Midianites.
Yes.
Who actually bought them. The terms kind of bounce back and forth.
Our sources clarify that these terms are likely used interchangeably for nomadic trading groups. Or it's possible Ishmaelites is a broad term for the overall group, while Midianites specifies the exact tribe.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the geography? They were coming from Gilead.
Right, and for a long time, geographers looked at this and scratched their heads. Gilead is over in the Transjordan. Why would traders coming from there go all the way over to Dothan, which is inland, to get to Egypt? It looks like a huge detour.
Yeah, if you look at a map, it seems like a long way around. Why not just go straight south down the King's Highway?
Well, a deep dive into the geography shows there was a very specific reason. The text mentions their cargo. It was spices, balm, and myrrh.
The incense trade.
Exactly. The sources explain that in the late Bronze Age, specifically around the mid-14th century BC, there was a major trade route that took incense from Arabia up the King's Highway.
Okay.
But to get it to the wealthy markets in Egypt, they would cut across the country, specifically near Dothan and Bethshan, to access the coastal road and head south.
So they were basically taking a bypass to get to the main highway on-ramp.
Exactly. That specific cargo on that specific route fits the historical context perfectly. It's another one of those seemingly boring details that actually validates the narrative.
Wow. Okay, so Joseph is sold. He's dragged down to Egypt.
Yeah.
And this is where the story shifts. I know the outline has us jumping to the theology here, but let's actually look at what happens next in Genesis 39, the temptation and integrity piece.
It's a crucial part of his character development.
He's bought by Potiphar, the captain of the guard. And Joseph actually pulls it together.
He does. He shows remarkable resilience. He rises to manage Potiphar's entire household.
But then Potiphar's wife takes an interest in him. And the text says she spoke to him day by day. It was relentless sexual harassment.
It was, and Joseph is in a terrible position. He's a slave, she's the master's wife, the power dynamic is totally skewed.
But he does the right thing. He refuses. He says he can't sin against God or betray his master. And one day when she tries to grab him, he literally runs out of the room. He leaves his coat behind him.
The second coat he's lost, by the way.
Right. And what is his reward for this supreme act of integrity? He gets falsely accused of assault and thrown into a dungeon.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
It is. We like to think, and we're often taught, that if you do the right thing, good things happen. Karma, right. But Joseph does the right thing, and his life gets objectively significantly worse.
It's a hard lesson, but the sources point out a key takeaway here. Faithfulness often comes with a cost. Success in the eyes of God isn't always immediate comfort.
Yeah.
But there is a little phrase that keeps popping up in the text, repeated 4 times actually, specifically when he is in that prison.
The Lord was with Joseph.
Even in the dungeon.
But what does that even mean? I'm with you, but I'm going to leave you in jail for a few years.
It means that God's presence didn't keep Joseph out of trouble, but it was with him in the trouble. And looking back, we can see that the prison was actually the waiting room for the palace.
Because if he hadn't been in that specific prison, he never would have met the cupbearer.
Exactly. That integrity, that refusal to compromise even when it cost him everything, was part of the character formation he needed.
This leads us perfectly into the biggest theme of the story, the core of this deep dive. We've done the history, we've done the character study. Now we have to talk about providence.
This is the absolute heartbeat of the narrative.
We hear that word providence a lot, but let's actually define it for you as you're listening. I found a quote in our source material that I thought was really solid. It defines providence as God's faithful and effective care and guidance of everything which he has made toward the end which he has chosen.
It's a great definition, but it can feel a bit abstract. I really prefer the analogy brought up in the sources from Joni Eareckson Tada and Randy Alcorn.
Oh, the sweep-up boy analogy.
Yes. They say God is not a sweep-up boy.
I laughed when I read that.
Yeah.
Just the image of the Almighty walking behind us with a broom and dustpan saying, oh, snap, they made a mess again. How do I fix this?
Right. That's a reactionary view of God.
Yeah.
That he's just constantly pivoting based on our bad luck or our mistakes.
Yeah.
But the story of Joseph suggests something very different. It suggests his hand is on the wheel from start to finish.
The key verse is obviously Genesis 50, verse 20. Years later, Joseph looks at his brothers, the guys who sold him for 20 shekels, and says, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good.
And we have to look closely at the distinction there. God meant it. It doesn't just say God made the best of a bad situation. He didn't just turn lemons into lemonade.
He intended it.
Yes, he intended the outcome for the saving of many lives.
But that creates a massive tension. Are you saying God wanted the brothers to sell him? Did they have a choice? Or were they just robots acting out a script?
That is the age-old theological paradox. The sources emphasize that God permitted the brothers' sin without forcing them to sin.
Okay.
The brothers were fully responsible for their evil actions. They acted out of jealousy and malice. But simultaneously, God was using their evil actions to accomplish a good purpose.
It's the ultimate chain reaction. Think about the dominoes here. If Joseph isn't sold, he doesn't go to Egypt. No Egypt, no Potiphar, no prison.
And no prison, no interpreting Pharaoh's dreams.
No dream interpretation, no grain silos.
And if there are no silos, when the famine hits, everyone starves.
Including Jacob's family.
Which means the tribe of Judah gets wiped out. And historically speaking, if there is no tribe of Judah, there is no Messiah.
Whoa. Okay. So the argument is that the entire trajectory of salvation history hinged on that one terrible afternoon in Dothan.
That's the claim. That evil intentions can be overruled for an ultimate good.
That is heavy. But you mentioned Messiah, and that is the perfect transition to the final layer, the typology.
Yes, the parallels.
Now, I have to admit, usually when people start talking about types and foreshadowing the Old Testament, I get a little skeptical. It feels like you can find a pattern in anything if you look hard enough, like seeing a face in a piece of toast.
I get that. Skepticism is healthy, but the concept of a type is an Old Testament person or event that directly foreshadows the Messiah. And the sources list dozens of parallels between Joseph and Jesus that are just so specific, it's hard to dismiss them.
Okay, let's do this rapid fire. Prove it to me. Give me the connections.
All right, let's start with the relationship to the Father. Both Joseph and Jesus were the beloved son, the favorite of the Father.
Okay, that's one. Both were also hated and rejected by their own brothers or their own people.
Let's look at the betrayal itself. We already talked about the price. Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver, the exact price of a slave.
And Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver, which was the price of a slave in his time.
Now look at the names. Do you remember which brother actually came up with the idea to sell Joseph?
I think Reuben wanted to save him. Simeon wanted to kill him. It was Judah. Judah suggested selling him.
Judah. And what is the Greek form of the name Judah?
Judas.
Right. Both are betrayed for the price of a slave by a brother named Judah or Judas.
Okay, hang on. That is statistically very unlikely.
It keeps going. Joseph was stripped of his coat by his brothers. Jesus was stripped of his robe by the Roman soldiers.
Joseph was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife.
Yeah.
Jesus was falsely accused by false witnesses at his trial.
And the prison setup. Joseph is in prison with 2 other men.
The cupbearer and the baker. One gets saved and restored, and one is lost and executed.
And Jesus is crucified between 2 thieves. One is saved today, you will be with me in paradise, and one is lost.
Man. And then there's the exaltation. Joseph goes from the pit to the right hand of Pharaoh. Jesus goes from the grave to the right hand of God.
And notice the purpose of their exaltation. Why was Joseph put in charge? To manage the grain, to provide bread for a starving world.
And Jesus calls himself the bread of life.
Exactly. Both offered forgiveness to those who sought to destroy them, providing bread and life to the very people who betrayed them.
It's that same concept of forgiveness. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
That sentiment is essentially the Christian theology of the cross. The worst act of evil in history was meant for the ultimate good of salvation.
So when you read Genesis, it's strangely familiar. You're basically reading a blueprint.
That's the idea of typology. It's setting a pattern.
I have to say, the Judah and Judas connection is the one that really sticks with me.
It reinforces that idea of providence we talked about.
So let's zoom out. We've covered a ton of ground here. We've gone from a dysfunctional tent in Canaan to the palace of Egypt. We've seen that the details like the 20 shekels and the king's highway trade routes, they really anchor this story in real history.
And we've seen the theological arc. That God isn't just sweeping up our messes, but is actively steering things through the chaos.
And we've seen those incredible typological parallels. But I want to bring this back to you, the listener, because most of us aren't ruling Egypt. But a lot of us might feel like we're in the pit, or we're in the prison phase of our lives.
I think the most powerful takeaway from the sources about perspective. When Joseph was sitting in that dungeon for years, mind you, he didn't have the book of Genesis to read. He couldn't flip to chapter 50 and see how it all ends.
Right, he was living it in real time without the spoilers.
Exactly. He couldn't see the end of the story while he was in the pit. He had no idea that his suffering was the exact mechanism that would be used to save the world from starvation.
That's such a provocative thought.
Yeah.
We look at our own lives, the setbacks, the betrayals, the Potiphar moments, and we just think, this is a total disaster.
But the question for you to mull over is this. What complex intertwining of events might be happening in your life right now?
Yeah.
Is it possible that you are playing a pivotal role in a story and you just can't see the end of it yet?
You might be in chapter 39, wondering why everything is going wrong when chapter 50 is already written.
Precisely.
Well, that is definitely something to chew on for the rest of the week. Thank you for unpacking this massive story with us.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.